In 1887, a photographer captured what appeared to be innocent children at play in Hartford's Riverside Park. 130 years later, digital enhancement revealed something that should not have been there, something that had been watching them from the shadows, waiting. Before we begin this chilling journey into the past, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. You're about to discover how modern technology can uncover horrors that Victorian society desperately tried to hide. Dr. Margaret Whitmore had spent 15 years as the chief archivist at the Connecticut Historical Society, methodically cataloguing thousands of photographs from the state's past. On a grey October morning in 2017, she was conducting routine digitization work on a collection donated by the estate of Theodore Blackwood, a prominent Hartford businessman who had died the previous year. The photograph in question measured 8 by 10 inches, mounted on heavy cardboard backing typical of commercial portrait studios of the 1880s. The image depicted 7 children, ranging in age from approximately 6 to 12 years old, playing in what appeared to be a well-maintained public park. Their poses suggested spontaneous play rather than the rigid formality typical of Victorian photography, which immediately caught Dr. Whitmore's attention. Something felt wrong about the composition. Using the Society's new high-resolution scanner, Dr. Whitmore began the digitization process. The resulting file revealed details invisible to the naked eye when examining the original photograph under standard lighting conditions. Most significantly, objects and figures that had previously remained hidden in the darker portions of the image. In the background, partially obscured by the dappled shadows of elm trees, stood a figure that had not been immediately apparent in the original photograph. The figure appeared to be an adult, wearing dark clothing that blended seamlessly with the shadows. What disturbed Dr. Whitmore was not the presence of another person in the photograph, but rather the positioning and apparent focus of this individual. While the children played in the foreground, completely absorbed in their activities, the shadowy figure seemed to be observing them with an intensity that felt predatory even across the span of more than a century. The photographer's stamp on the back of the mounting board identified the image as the work of Samuel Hendricks, a commercial photographer who had operated a studio on Main Street from 1882 until 1891. Dr. Whitmore located Hendricks' business ledgers in the Society's archives, meticulously maintained records that documented every commission, including the date, client, and subject matter of each photograph. There was no record of this particular photograph in Hendricks' ledgers. This absence was highly unusual. Hendricks had been known for his obsessive record-keeping, documenting even the smallest portrait sessions and commercial assignments. The omission suggested that either the photograph had been taken outside of his normal business operations or that the record had been deliberately removed from his files. Dr. Whitmore contacted Detective James Morrison of the Hartford Police Department's Cold Case Unit, a specialist in historical crime investigation who had assisted the Historical Society with previous research projects. Morrison agreed to examine the photograph and provide his perspective on what they were observing. "The positioning bothers me," Morrison said during their meeting 3 days later, studying the high-resolution print that Dr. Whitmore had prepared. "See how the children are completely unaware of being watched. That suggests either the observer was exceptionally skilled at remaining hidden, or the children had become accustomed to this presence, and either possibility is comforting when we're talking about an adult lurking near a children's play area." Morrison recommended that they search for any police records or newspaper reports from 1887 that might reference incidents in Riverside Park or involving children in the Hartford area. This investigation led them to the Hartford Courant Archives, where they discovered a series of articles that had been buried in the back pages of the newspaper during the late summer and early autumn of 1887. The first article, dated August 15, 1887, carried the headline, "Child Missing from Riverside Park." The brief report described the disappearance of 8-year-old Emma Patterson, who had been playing with friends near the park's central fountain when she vanished without explanation. Her companions reported that Emma had been there one moment and gone the next, with no one observing her departure from the play area. A second article, published September 3, 1887, reported the disappearance of 10-year-old Thomas Caldwell under remarkably similar circumstances. Thomas had been playing with several other children in Riverside Park when he simply vanished. His friends insisted that he had been with them continuously until the moment they realized he was no longer there. The third article, dated September 22, 1887, described the disappearance of 7-year-old Sarah Mitchell. Again, the child had been playing in Riverside Park with friends when she disappeared without any witness observing her departure. 3 children, 3 disappearances, all from the same location within a span of 5 weeks. Dr. Whitmore spent the following week researching the missing children, searching through birth records, school enrollment documents, and church registers to build complete profiles of Emma Patterson, Thomas Caldwell, and Sarah Mitchell. What she discovered was deeply disturbing. According to the records, all 3 children had been found dead within 2 weeks of their disappearances, their bodies discovered in remote locations outside of Hartford. The death certificates, filed with the Connecticut State Department of Health, listed the cause of death for all 3 children as accidental drowning, despite the fact that their bodies had been found in wooded areas miles from any significant body of water. The certificates had been signed by Dr. Cornelius Blackwood, a physician who served as Hartford's chief medical examiner from 1885 to 1892. The name Blackwood was familiar. Theodore Blackwood, whose estate had donated the photograph collection, was the great-grandson of Dr. Cornelius Blackwood. This genealogical connection could not be dismissed as mere coincidence. The photograph that had started this investigation had come from the family archives of a man whose ancestor had been directly involved in documenting the deaths of the missing children. Dr. Whitmore contacted the Connecticut State Archives to request access to Dr. Cornelius Blackwood's personal papers and medical records from his tenure as chief medical examiner. What she found in those files would fundamentally alter her understanding of the events that had transpired in Hartford during the autumn of 1887. Hidden within a collection of routine medical correspondence was a leather-bound journal that Dr. Blackwood had maintained during his years in public service. The journal entries from September and October 1887 revealed a man grappling with profound moral conflicts and mounting pressure from unnamed authorities to falsify official records. The entry dated September 25, 1887, 3 days after Sarah Mitchell's disappearance was reported, contained a disturbing passage revealing that the cause of death was not drowning as he was instructed to record. The children showed evidence of prolonged captivity and systematic abuse before death. Dr. Blackwood feared he was being made complicit in covering up crimes of unspeakable nature, yet he was told that revealing the truth would cause public panic. A later entry, dated October 12, 1887, was even more explicit, describing how the man they had arrested operated with complete impunity, protected by individuals whose names he dared not commit to writing. He had been targeting children in public spaces for months, possibly years, yet the authorities seemed more concerned with maintaining public order than with seeking justice for his victims. The final relevant entry, dated November 3, 1887, suggested that Dr. Blackwood had discovered the identity of the perpetrator. The photographer Hendricks had been arrested, though not for the crimes they knew he had committed. They claimed he was involved in financial improprieties with his business, but Dr. Blackwood had seen the evidence linking him to the deaths of the children. His studio was searched, and they found photographs that no decent human being should possess. Samuel Hendricks, the same photographer whose stamp appeared on the back of the photograph that had initiated this investigation. Dr. Whitmore immediately returned to her examination of the original photograph, this time focusing specifically on the shadowy figure in the background. Using advanced digital enhancement techniques, she was able to isolate and clarify the image of the observer. The enhanced image revealed facial features that, while partially obscured by shadows and the limitations of 1880s photographic technology, were clearly those of a middle-aged man with a distinctive beard and piercing eyes. She compared this enhanced image to a formal portrait of Samuel Hendricks that she located in the Hartford City Directory for 1887. The facial structure, beard pattern, and general physical characteristics were consistent with the shadowy figure in the children's photograph. The realization was chilling. Hendricks had not simply been a photographer documenting innocent childhood play, he had been stalking potential victims, using his camera as both a tool for surveillance and a means of selecting targets. The photograph was not a casual documentation of children at play, but rather evidence of a predator in the act of choosing his next victim. This discovery prompted Dr. Whitmore to examine the faces of the children in the photograph more carefully, comparing them to the newspaper descriptions and any available photographs of Emma Patterson, Thomas Caldwell, and Sarah Mitchell. While the photographic quality and the passage of time made definitive identification challenging, The ages, physical descriptions, and time frame were all consistent. It was entirely possible that she was looking at a photograph of Hendricks' victims taken in the weeks or days before their disappearances and murders. Detective Morrison arranged for the photograph to be examined by the FBI's Forensic Photography Unit, specialists in historical image analysis who could provide expert testimony regarding the authenticity and content of the image. Their preliminary report, delivered 2 weeks later, confirmed that the photograph was genuine and had not been altered or manipulated. More significantly, their analysis of the shadowy figure's positioning and apparent focus supported the theory that the individual was engaged in surveillance of the children. The FBI team also identified several other disturbing elements that had not been immediately apparent. Using spectral analysis and digital enhancement techniques unavailable to previous generations of investigators, they discovered that the shadowy figure was holding what appeared to be a small notebook or journal, possibly documenting his observations of the children. Additionally, they identified scratch marks on several of the elm trees in the background, marks that were consistent with someone having climbed or positioned ladders against the trees to gain elevated observation points. These details painted a picture of systematic, prolonged surveillance, no a chance encounter, but rather evidence of a predator who had been studying his intended victims over an extended period. Armed with this evidence, Dr. Whitmore petitioned the Hartford Police Department to reopen the cases of Emma Patterson, Thomas Caldwell, and Sarah Mitchell. While the perpetrator had been dead for more than a century, the families of the victims deserved to know the truth about what had happened to their children. The investigation that followed revealed the scope of the conspiracy that had protected Samuel Hendricks during his lifetime. City officials, prominent businessmen, and even members of the clergy had been aware of his crimes but had chosen to prioritize social stability over justice for his victims. The cover-up had extended far beyond Dr. Blackwood's falsified death certificates, encompassing destroyed police records, suppressed newspaper reports, and intimidated witnesses. At least 12 children had disappeared from Hartford's parks and public spaces between 1885 and 1887. All had been officially listed as runaways or accident victims. All had been murdered by Samuel Hendricks. The photograph that had started this investigation represented something far more sinister than anyone had initially realized. It was documentary evidence of a serial killer in the act of selecting victims, preserved by chance in a family archive for more than a century before modern technology could reveal its terrible secret. On a cold December morning, exactly 130 years after the photograph was taken, Dr. Whitmore stood in the same location in Riverside Park where the children had played in 1887. The elm trees were gone, replaced by modern playground equipment and carefully manicured lawns. Families still brought their children to play in this space, unaware of the horrors that had once transpired here. She held the original photograph in her hands, studying the faces of the children one final time. 7 innocent faces, captured in a moment of carefree play, unaware that they were being watched by a monster who would soon destroy their lives and traumatize their families. The knowledge of what had happened to these children and to the others whose cases had been covered up would remain with her forever. The Hartford Police Department officially reopened the cold cases and issued public statements acknowledging the truth about the children's deaths. Memorial markers were installed in Riverside Park, honoring the memory of Emma Patterson, Thomas Caldwell, Sarah Mitchell, and the other victims whose names had been recovered during the investigation. But questions remained unanswered. How many other photographs existed in private collections, family archives, and historical societies that might contain similar evidence of historical crimes? How many other perpetrators had been protected by communities more concerned with reputation than justice? The technology that had revealed Samuel Hendricks' presence in the shadows of Riverside Park could potentially expose other predators who had operated with impunity during eras when their crimes could more easily be concealed. The past was not as settled as most people believed. It remained an active crime scene, waiting for the right tools and the right investigators to uncover its buried truths. Modern society's faith in its institutions and its belief in the fundamental decency of previous generations had been built upon carefully constructed narratives that often bore little resemblance to historical reality. The photograph from 1887 served as a reminder that evil had always existed, and that communities had always been willing to sacrifice justice for the comfort of denial when the truth proved too disturbing to acknowledge. As Dr. Whitmore locked the photograph away in the society's climate-controlled storage facility, she reflected on the responsibility that came with this knowledge. The families of Samuel Hendricks' victims had finally received some measure of truth and recognition, but the broader implications of the cover-up that had protected him remained largely unaddressed. The photograph would remain in the archives, available to future researchers who might discover additional connections or uncover evidence of other crimes. But it would also serve as a warning about the dangers of accepting official narratives without scrutiny and about the importance of listening to victims and their families when they challenged comfortable lies. The children in the photograph had been dead for more than a century, but their story had finally been told. In a small way, justice had been served. But the question remained: how many other stories were still waiting to be discovered, still buried in archives and family collections, still protected by the conspiracy of silence that had kept Samuel Hendricks' crimes hidden for so long? The shadows in historical photographs hold more secrets than we realize, and modern technology continues to reveal truths that previous generations worked desperately to conceal. If you're still watching, tell me where you're from and what time it is. Like this video and subscribe for more stories that history tried to bury. The past is never as innocent as it appears on the surface, and sometimes the most disturbing revelations are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with the right tools and the courage to look more closely.